All right, let's get started. Welcome to the Utah Lake Commission Technical Committee meeting. It's May 15th, 2019. We'd like to start by going around and introducing ourselves so that we can refamiliarize ourselves with those that we know and familiarize ourselves with those who may be here for the first time. So let's start over here in the corner. If you'd introduce with your name and organization that you are representing, if one.
I'm Dax Reed, Provo Watershed Coordinator. Work with UDAP, UWQ, and RCN.
Sarah Carroll, Saratoga Springs Planning.
Morgan Faulkner, Forestry Fire and State Lands.
Josh Holt, Utah State Parks.
Mike Rao, Central Utah Water.
D. Chamberlain, Saratoga Springs Owners Association.
Sam Brager, Utah Lake Commission.
Eric Ellis, Utah Lake Commission.
Reed Price with Orem City.
Scott Daly with the Division of Water Quality and Vice Chair of the Technical Committee.
Kaylee Jorgensen with Utah Lake Commission.
Andrew Spade with Linden City.
Jesse Stewart with Utah Lake Water Users.
Mike Mills with the June Summer Recovery Implementation Program.
Corey Pierce, Spanish Fork City.
Scott Hurd, Utah County.
Juan Garrido, Springville City.
All right. First item we have is to review and approve the Utah Lake Commission Technical Committee meeting minutes from March 14th, 2019. If you've had a chance to read those, I would entertain a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Scott makes a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second over here. Any further discussion on it? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Okay, minutes are approved. We'll turn the time over to Eric for updates from the director.
Okay. Thank you, Reed. And thanks for everybody being here. We got a good group today. Lake level. The lake is doing great. I was fishing down on the lake yesterday and walking through water on what I was hoping was going to be a trail. This is a good sign. According to the Central Utah site, we're 1.85 feet below full. Way better than was the expected even so far, and runoff is just kind of getting full underway on Provo River anyway. Any expectations on that, Mike?
I think the cool spring has helped keep water demand low so far. So if that pattern continues, I think we probably get even a little better than we are now.
Awesome.
I don't think we've peaked yet. So.
Okay. So I wanted to bring two budget requests that we're putting on this year's the fiscal year 2020 budget request at our upcoming governing board meeting. The first is Utah Lake Shoreline Improvement. This is will act as a grant for communities. I think we have briefly discussed it at our last meeting, but it's $30,000 that goes towards shoreline improvement projects. So if you have shoreline and a plan in place for some type of improvement, be that improving a beach or adding some amenities down there, the idea was to kind of act as seed money for matching grants and other municipal and county funding for getting some projects done on the lake shore. Just got out of a meeting with county commission or our county commission representative, and and they are very interested in pursuing Utah Lake type projects going forward, and we'll be working on some potential funding sources through the county for bigger projects than we've had in a while now down on the lake. So keep in tune for those. The second item is the Utah Lake Shoreline Assessment Study up on the blurry-ish screen. This is the scope of work that we're talking about. Generally speaking, it is to do a soil assessment around the lakeshore, the entire lakeshore, at a minimum of 1 mile increments, but in some locations more so, to do one soil assessment at where the high water is right now, or where the water is right now, and then one just above the high water mark, so that as a technical committee, we will have an opportunity to review that study and make determinations on best practices for beach enhancements. So there's areas along the Utah Lake shoreline that are currently invaded with Phragmites, but that historically were sandy beaches. There's other areas that were historically wetlands. So this will help kind of identify those and then help us kind of make decisions for future planning, specifically with the county who carries out all of the invasive weed removal. This will help determine where we really emphasize the removal effort so that we can get natives restored, and other areas where we just hit it hard and restore the sand to what it was previously. So this is something that we are planning to partner with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands on. We had a kind of a rough estimate from one of the consultants, and it's kind of in the ballpark of about $50,000. So we will request $25,000 of that through our capital projects fund, and then the Forestry, Fire, and State Lands has promised that they will partner with us and come up with the other half. So any questions on that?
You've already requested that of the governing board. Have they adopted a tentative budget?
They've adopted a tentative budget, but this is an amendment to the tentative
so
budget.
we asking for that?
The $25,000 was on the tentative budget. Sorry, wasn't on that, but the $30,000 for the grant portion was. So this will be an amendment to our tentative budget presented in June.
An addition to it?
Correct.
Okay.
We presented it to the executive committee, and they supported and said, yeah, present it to the governing board. Waikara Way, we've all heard about it. Here's kind of the latest version of working on it. Specifically, this identifies some potential fence lines to break up the grazing. Phase 1 is what you see in that purple color, including the spurs that come out to the lake. That is approximately 14,000 feet of fence. The fence line that goes along the east side, so that purple line along the kind of dividing the eastern edge of the project to the community there, that fence would be the same kind of fence that you see along the highways for wildlife barrier, so 8 feet tall. It's a little more expensive, but it ranges from as little as $7 a linear foot to as much as $30 a linear foot. So we'll have to get some bids on that when we find our funding. And then these trail spur, or not trail, but the spurs coming out to divide these sections. There's about an equal amount, up closer to 8,000 linear feet, but that would just be barbed wire, 4-strand barbed wire with T-posts.
I was going to ask what type of fence, because that estimate here, that was pricey.
So it's 8 feet tall wildlife barrier. The purpose behind it is twofold. One, to really guarantee that cows can't get through, because it's a community there, and that could be an expensive liability to the owner of the cows, I guess. And the other is to prevent people from using any spot along that divider as an entry point. So they don't want backyard access into the park. They want individuals using this park area to use the designated access points. So, and at those places there will just be a cattle guard and potentially an equestrian gate that you can swing open.
Vinyl?
Is it vinyl?
Vinyl? What?
No. A good example, if you've been up I-80, just east of Park City, you'll see, in the last few years, they built. It looks like chicken wire, kind of, like the squares.
Yeah.
And 8 feet tall. So you see through it. It's just taller than normal and really good at keeping animals out. The reason why it ends up being a little bit more costly is because every half mile or so you install a wildlife jump over. I don't know the word for it, but a crossing. And those add a little bit to the cost. Also on here, not as visible, right by where you see University Parkway in the middle segment there, if you look close, you can see a blue outline. And then also to the left of that, where you see Orem River, you see a purple little polygon there. Those are potential community ponds. We met with 2 Division of Wildlife Resource representatives, Mark Farmer and Drew Cushing, to talk about community fisheries, and they were really excited about these 2 sites. There's a cold water spring that's coming out right by Golden Pond on the golf course that's not really used for anything, that they would be willing to pump into a cold water pond so you could have trout or something like that. It's more cold water species. And then this lower one by University Parkway, written on the screen there, would be a warm water fishery, and that one would just have be stocked with fish that you typically find in the lake, but just more of them, whether those be walleye or bass or something like that. That would be a desirable fishing spot. So the Division of Wildlife really like the idea, and they're kind of doing research on water rights that exist in the area and what the potential for that spot could be. Any other questions about the project so far? Oh, one other, where did I put it? Right at the end here. We were able to put the trail delineation on that following the kind of this high point on the land out near the shore, and do that with a GPS tracker, and that is what that would look like, at least up to the Orem River or the Orem effluent. Going south from there, we're planning a meeting with Bureau of Reclamation and talk with them about it and get them on board, and once they are, we'll kind of map that section from the south end or from the Orem River there down to where the new Provo River Delta would be, so that it could potentially tie in with that. Okay. RFP for algae bloom treatments. Oh, I just jumped ahead one. Sneak peek. So there's been a proposal as you know, we did a request for information, and we got a bunch of information packets from entities that had various types of technologies, both chemical, mechanical, or what was the last one? Biological. Thank you. Projects or innovations to treat algae blooms that take place on the lake in a more acute way, and we got a number of really good ones. Some of them not so much, but we decided to switch that to an RFP and open the opportunity for at least 3, maybe 4, depending on the costs that are associated with those proposals, pilot projects to take place this summer on our marinas. So we're going to rank the marinas based on the projects that come in to kind of figure out what would be an appropriate one for each of the proposals that are selected. And that RFP has been submitted to state purchasing, and it should be public, they said, in 7 to 10 calendar days. So as soon as that comes out, we'll share that with the technical committee, and you can share that with individuals that have had ideas for you in the past, and it'll articulate what we're looking for as far as potential solutions. So there's a small amount of funding available through the state Utah Lake Water Quality Study that will fund those, and we'll see how they go. It'll just be that pilot level, so no more than 50 acres per study. Any other thoughts on that?
No.
Okay.
I was just gonna ask a question though. When you think you'll be through the actual closing of the bids for the RFPs, selecting and then actually implementing on the ground?
Great question. I don't know the answer, but it probably won't be a long RFP window. So we'll share it out to everybody that submitted RFIs and anyone else that we have contacts with that have contacted us over time. And probably do a 2-week window for bids to come in, and then we'll just try to expedite that and do a selection so that it's not overly late, maybe right around the time bloom season is kicking in.
Okay. And then the next question, what's the, you had that working group, Forest Fire State Lands, Fish Wildlife, and others, Ag. Will you involve those folks in evaluating the RFPs?
Absolutely.
And then do you anticipate any permitting from those agencies and entities?
There may be. So Fish and Wildlife Service said it needs to consider June sucker.
Right.
Some of the processes that are being suggested wouldn't have any impact on fish, and so those would be the types that it would simply be a nod of approval. But any others that, like a chemical type treatment, if one of those is selected that isn't well known, will have all the ingredients of what they're using, and that would probably need a consultation. But that's not my specialty, but that's why we will include them. And
so depending on which projects you rank and select, you might have a varying level of
scrutiny,
timeline
yeah.
for implementation based on that permitting scrutiny.
Yep. Okay. Marshmasters, just an update on the Marshmasters. Do you have an update at all on those? I can give an update if.
I don't.
Okay. So the Marshmasters are operating marvelously. The problem that we've been having is there's a coupler that goes between the Marshmaster PTO and this hydraulic, drive that connects to the mower, and they're exploding on us. They started out stripping, and we got heavier duty ones, and now they just split right down the middle on the weld. So motor pool from the county is figuring out what can be done to improve that. And as soon as they do, we'll have them back out on the ground, and they'll continue where they left off, which is kind of about the middle of the north end of the lake. So it's just kind of on a stall right now because those aren't working, and those little couplers are $500 a piece, and you'd think that they'd last longer than 2 hours like the last one did.
Are these the ones that the county owns, or is it still through VG?
This is the county-owned ones.
The brand new ones.
The brand new ones. So the Marshmasters work great, the mowers work great. It's just that link between the two that's causing problems.
Are the mowers a Marshmaster product?
No, but the link is a Marshmaster product. The mowers are just a regular, I forget the brand, King, or a separate brand. More or less. So we might have to consult with PMG again to figure out how they linked between the two more successfully than those are happening. But
So is PMG completely out of the picture, or?
on Utah Lake, for the most part, except for the project that they're doing for you and the county. Okay. Communications, Utah Lake is my lake. Sam, do you want to talk about it, and then we'll have Kaylee talk about the designs?
Yeah, so as a refresher, Utah Lake is My Lake is the campaign, if you will, the PR campaign that we developed to try and organize our efforts in promoting the lake through the eyes of the people who use and love and work at the lake. So the idea originated after we'd discussed with some different communicators around the lake we work with, as well as meeting with residents such as, I think Clayton's even here, and others who use the lake and love it for what it is. And so we've made some progress on it this year, which I think Kay's going to talk about the graphic part, but do you want me to mention the interview part as well? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, so we started off, Kaylee actually did an interview with Joe RV from Epic Recreation, who is down here and loves the lake. And that's going to be turned into a blog post that will be kind of the kickoff for trying to publicize this campaign. Up until now, it's been mostly working behind the scenes and trying to prepare things and developing events and such. So we're excited for that to come out. From that, we'll then look at doing additional interviews in a video format with other users of the lake. That's where we mentioned last time you all suggested a few names that we could work with in addition to the ones we'd already been compiling. As well as inside of this campaign, we'll also be working on events we're already running, like the field trips and the festival. We're adding in attending the city festivals during the summer. So we just did Lehigh City Expo a short while ago. We'll be doing the Highland Fling. We're going to try and do American Fork Steel Days. I don't remember, there, but there's 3 or 4 more that we're going to be doing too. So all in that effort of trying to reach out to the public better maybe than we have in the past, and try and also communicate in a way that shows them just how much people love the lake and why they love the lake.
Quick question. Does anybody in the group have on staff somebody that is good at editing video?
Possibly.
That they want to...
Possibly so.
Not that I
Let me
know
check.
of.
And in addition to your comment, Vineyard is doing their 30-year anniversary celebration end of this month. Have you?
Yes, so actually, we can, if you're okay with that, I can mention that real quickly. So I actually talked with Jake Hard yesterday on the phone. So the city of Vineyard is doing their celebration, and they are going to do fireworks from a barge out on the lake. And that will be on June 1st, the same day as our Utah Lake Festival. So he and I yesterday were chatting on coming up with some ideas on how we can do some cross-promotion and hopefully get people to come down, as well as work with state parks and Linden Marina to try and facilitate boats that are probably going to be wanting to be out on the water for that show. So we're excited to have that. I don't know if we could say it's exactly the first fireworks show on Utah Lake ever, because it probably happened at some point before. But they're excited to do it. Jake McHarg went as far as saying that he thinks it's going to be comparable to the Stadium of Fire. So I've never been to the Stadium of Fire, so I don't know if I could compare that honestly myself.
Let's not set the bar too high here.
But the only thing I say is he's very excited and optimistic about it.
Those fireworks are massive though, and that's a lot of litter.
True. So they actually discuss it with all state agencies involved. So Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. They talk with Division of Water Quality and Division of Air Quality to try and get best practices. There is not a permitting process for something like this currently, but from each of them they got that input of try and make sure there's as least debris as possible, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, if you go to the stadium, you get rained on with ash and litter, and it's a lot. So
Sure.
I don't know. Anyway, I have a quick question. So you interviewed who?
Joe RV.
Who is that?
So he's the Epic Recreation concessionaire here. So he does paddleboard rentals, motorboats, all those kinds of things.
ARAVE. Pronounced RV.
Okay, I was
So he's been a concessionaire here for, what, Josh, 4 years?
ARVIA.
ARAVE.
Yeah. So he's been a concessionaire for several years here. He
Rave.
really loves spending time at the lake.
So Epic, what's it called?
Recreation?
Oh, at Provo Bay.
Yes, at the Utah Lake State Park here.
Thanks.
Just right, turn it over to Kaylee.
Oh.
Talk about the cool part.
Kaylee?
Yeah, so these are just some mock-up designs that I've thought of for the Utah Lake is My Lake logo. I guess we're just kind of looking for feedback of which ones you guys like, what you like about them, anything that you think could be changed. We kind of want the feel of like this is my lake and this is why I love it. So we want kind of a warm, inviting feel to the logo.
I like the bottom.
Can we put,
Bottom
how
right?
you have the rectangle and the square, what about the state shape?
Around, you
Oh,
mean,
that'd be cool.
as the border around the whole
Well,
image?
yeah, like we've got the border, a rectangle or a square, but what if it was the state shape? Like
I like
in
that.
there somewhere?
Yeah. I
See,
like
and the one that's squashed down and so the lake pokes out,
Yeah,
the idea was to give it a sense of magnitude.
uh-huh.
And so if we make it look big on the state shape, I think that does an even better job.
That'd be cool.
It's
Great
totally
idea.
realistic, right?
Yeah.
That might make it more of a vertical logo.
Which is fine.
Because this is kind of
Yeah, that's
horizontal, so
totally
you might
fine.
have to shift Utah. But you could still keep Utah Lake and just shift it up into the, and then maybe fit the
Yeah.
state shape around it somehow.
Yeah, I like
Anyway.
that. That's awesome.
I like those better than
The left and the top you like better?
yeah. But I also like color in things, so to me those are lacking color. So that's just an opinion.
That's what we're asking for, though, so I appreciate you
Yeah.
commenting.
Would an algae green work with it?
That's
No,
the
gotta be
Ski the
careful
Skunk
with the
t-shirt we're working on, Sullivan, not this shirt.
We did
Or
in
not this logo.
Sarasota City have some presentation with a picture of the lake, and one of our council members said, "Our lake isn't blue. You put the wrong picture." I was like, okay.
It's pretty blue right now. It's looking pretty good.
So I don't know. We could use.
Now we just need Google to take
I don't know what
satellite
colors,
imagery
but
today.
the water part could be a different color, like a more bluish green or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Something maybe to break up the blue, though, at
Yeah.
least. Some additional color.
And then the fonts could be different colors too, so that it's a little less, more color and less monochromatic. Just,
Sometimes we shoot for monochromatic because of the cost,
yeah,
but
so.
on digital marketing use of it, it won't matter whether
Yeah.
it's multicolor. So, great ideas.
Are these going to be used for like shirts and stickers kind of thing? Or?
Currently, our plan with this particular logo is mostly digital. It's mostly going to be things like in the credits of the videos that we develop or in the blog posts that we write. Eventually, it could be a t-shirt, so I think developing a monochromatic as well as multicolor would be useful. But right now, we don't have a plan for t-shirts or other promotional items for this one.
Are you sure you don't want an island in the middle? Just kidding.
She could draw it in there pretty easily, but I don't want anybody
Or
getting
a
any ideas.
bridge across.
All right. Well, thank you for your feedback. Scott, do you want to talk about the RFPs for the
Did you want
near
to show
term?
the, or is that later?
I can show it at the end.
Okay.
So, three major topics are being requested for proposal.
I forgot to mention the festival.
I'll get to it. Those are projects or studies that will be done this summer, or at least started this summer. The RFPs have been issued, and the links are out. Those are being shared around. There's three topics. Maybe talk about them.
Yeah, so the Utah Lake Science Panel has a long list of studies that they're interested in, and they prioritize 3 to do sooner than later because they'll help inform some of the questions down the road. So we went out, spent the last couple months developing the RFPs with the Science Panel and our consultant for bioassay assessments to look at which nutrients are limiting in the lake and how those conditions change throughout the season. A paleolimnologic study looking at sediment cores so we can more accurately date the sediment stratigraphy more than or better than it has been done before, to look at how nutrients have changed through time from pre-settlement to current conditions, look at diatom structure and how diatoms have changed, looking for various indicators of nutrient enrichment and how conditions have changed throughout the history. So that's the second one, and the third one is more of a sediment interface, sediment chemistry experimentation, looking at how nutrients are exchanged from the water column into the sediment and vice versa, and how those fluxes might be adjusted under a reduced nutrient condition in the lake. So if we're reduced every drop of nutrients, will we still expect to see a certain amount of phosphorus and nitrogen coming out of the sediment? And for how long, and how would that change over time? So those RFPs are out. They've been out for a little over, is it 2 weeks now? I've lost track of time. They close on the 22nd of May. We've distributed them to all of our local university partners, all of our science panel members, all of the steering committee members, with the expectation that they're kind of broadcast as far and wide as folks think is necessary. We're intending to use our Utah Lake study funds, and actually these are more or less grant proposals. So we'll be granting with our water quality board directly to the winning proposals. So they'll close on the 22nd. We'll work with our science panel that following week to evaluate the proposals. Science panel will select the winning proposals in each category, and then on the 30th we have a steering committee meeting that will just be looking for some endorsement from the steering committee that we're on the right track with funding the ones that we're recommending.
Great. Okay, so we'll come back to Scott for a more general water quality study update. But real quick, wanted to let you know that the Knolls, and at any point you can chip in on this because this is a big county project. The Knolls was acquired by the county, at least the church portion of that was, and now the county has an agreement on the table for how they will manage that with Division of Wildlife. Division of Wildlife is reviewing that agreement, and then it'll be ready for going before the county commission for final approval. And that part of that will include how they'll upgrade that facility over there. This is just kind of that hilltop that you see as you drive south on just past Saratoga Springs. That oftentimes you'll see campers or people on ATVs down in there. It'll legitimize the uses down there and kind of make it a really well used and nice place to visit.
Where is it? Sorry.
So if you head is it just south of Pelican Point?
Oh, really?
I think it's still a couple of miles.
Like people camp there and everything, right? And those.
There's
some-
I think it's a BLM land.
Campfires and stuff like that. And is that where?
There's some of those uses happening right now. I don't know how many are legitimate at this point. I know that you're not supposed to be camping there right now.
Is it private? I thought it was.
There's some.
It belongs to the county now.
I know it's.
Well, so there's a county park, so I think there might be some other federal
So
agency
there's
that owns
a
land in the area
private
too.
land nearby too that people
Yeah.
can be camping on, and that's where the issues are.
So the Smith, it's just to the north of the Smith Family Reserve, which is a fenced-in area that has petroglyphs and some Native American history. That's been the easement was purchased on that and is held by the Smith Family Preserve, and
Is it south of or north
it's
of?
just to the north of that.
Okay. And so the uses that are going to be legitimized are the camping and
That's all part of the agreement that's
Oh,
being
okay.
reviewed by the Division of Wildlife attorneys right now. So that'll come back and that'll get approved, and then we'll have more details on it. But right now we just know that the agreement is there, the land was acquired by the county, and we're excited about that. So we'll keep you updated as that moves ahead, and it seems to be moving ahead fairly quickly. So Vineyard Beach enhancement project. Sullivan, did you want to talk about that one at all?
I can add a little bit. I mean, you can add additionally. We submitted for a grant for $100,000, I believe it was, a matching grant, and we've received that grant.
That was through the Office of Outdoor Recreation.
Yeah, and so we're going to do some enhancement at the current little beach area there by the cooling ponds, the old cooling ponds with Dean Steel. Put in a little vehicle access down close to the lake shore with a turnaround so that people can take their kayaks or paddle boards or whatever, have a little bit closer access to the lakefront. Put in a restroom facility and some boardwalk areas. It can enhance the parking that is up on the top side there. So we're pretty excited about that and hope to move forward with that really soon.
And we'll be going before the county on June 7th to request before the tab board and I get it wrong every time because I hear it different every time, but the TRT or TRC fund through the county.
Correct. Yeah, we met with Commissioner Ainge, and they made a presentation of some of our preliminary plans, and he basically says, I like the idea, but I want you to wow me. You know, really put together a better plan as to what the future holds with the development of Lakeshore along Vineyard. And so we've gone back to the drawing board, and we've got some staff, some volunteer staff to really get some cool drawings and plans together to present to them, and we'll see what kind of funds they have available for us.
And we'll have, I met with Commissioner Ainge and Flagship and asked Flagship to use their renowned architect firm to to also put together some mock-ups. And so as soon as those are done, they're shooting for the next week or two to have those ready. I'll bring those back to Vineyard and sit down with is it Matt that's been working on that? Your engineer?
Morgan, Bram, the planner, and then Chris Wilson, the assistant city engineer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In addition to that, I don't know who all is aware of this, but all of the old Geneva Steel property was owned by Anderson Geneva Development. That has changed hands to Flagship Development. So they bought all of the rights of the Anderson Geneva group. So you'll probably still see the Anderson Geneva name out there, but it is managed and owned by Flagship Development now.
So, and they have some pretty neat plans that they're kind of working on developing, and that's why we approached them and said, hey, while you're doing all of these plans, maybe put together some ideas for the frontage here. So, okay. Also, as a side note, Saratoga Springs put in for a Office of Outdoor Recreation grant just to the north of Utah Lake on the Jordan River, and they received that grant, and so that will provide a couple access points into the river there. I'm sad Elliot's not here to hear the good news, but Elliot Mott's been petitioning for some of those access points.
Is that right by the RC park?
Correct.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
I work there and I didn't even know.
We only found out a few days ago. So.
Okay, so water quality.
Okay, so we've spent the last couple months mostly focused on developing those RFPs that I just talked about. Our science panel was in town in early February and again in early March. Kind of shifted focus a little bit and put more effort on developing those RFPs, and then pulled back on work for some of these other work elements. These are the work elements that we have in a contract with Tetra Tech, our technical consultant, providing support for the science panel. The diagram just shows that they're all kind of interrelated with one another, and there's an iterative process to develop one, and then move to the next, and then make sure that the first one was adequate. So we've completed our literature review. The literature review is related directly to the framework. Framework is the essentially roadmap for how we develop criteria for the lake. So which things we look at, how we relate them to one another, how the specific studies we need to inform the criteria are developed. Conceptual models, those are nearly complete. We've spent a little bit of time and have gotten good feedback from the science panel. Conceptual models are really just kind of drawing lines from all the different linkages in the lake to see like how nutrients respond, or how chlorophyll responds to nutrients, how our HABs related to nutrients, how the sediment nutrients connected to the water nutrients, how are the inputs to the lake connected to the in-lake processes, and then how are those all connected to the management goals at the end of the day. So I just have a general example I think that I've shown last time. So we're starting to dive into the framework document now, and within the next week or so, actually tomorrow, we're starting the data characterization, so that we have a revised data set that went to our consultant last week, and their analyst is about ready to jump in. The science panel's more or less approved an analysis plan. We're waiting for one more round of comments, but there's a couple of things that they're already settled on, some easy to do tasks that we're going to jump into next week. We're also starting to explore this uncertainty guidance document concept, and this is basically a document that's going to tell us, how comfortable are we with the level of information that we have, and are we okay making decisions based on that, the quality of that information. So we haven't really started working on that. We have a draft outline just internally with our consultant. A strategic research plan. This is a product that we expect to be developed later this fall. And it's kind of two parts. The overall research plan for the lake, all the missing pieces, right, to fill all of those knowledge gaps. The second part are those initial knowledge gaps related to those RFPs that I discussed. And so those top priority things that we need to know are already moving forward, and they are a component of that strategic research plan that will be developed later in the year. So, I think by next time we'll have quite a bit more to discuss on the data characterization and framework document, and then the uncertainty guidance. And then just, okay,
Maybe not.
okay, there we go. Now it's going to go 6 slides ahead.
Scott, I've got a quick question.
Sure.
The exploratory research, did we put a timeline on when in those scope of work on how soon they should be done with all of those?
Yes. And the sediment and paleo studies should be wrapped up in January. We think that most of those, any researcher that applies for those could mobilize this fall and do work for coring and sediment collection, and then spend the late fall and early winter analyzing results, and then writing up the results and conclusions to be done towards the middle, end of January. The bioassay one, we've added a little more flexibility, thinking that we're a little later than we wanted to be. We wanted to be able to assess spring conditions in the lake, but the science panel felt comfortable that if we mobilized in July, August, September timeframe, did various rounds of bioassays every month or every other month, that we could then complete a round or two in the spring to have a more complete picture. So we have, I think that scope of work is going to wrap up in June 30th, I think is what we put in there. All of these RFPs and the contracts that will come out of them, the expectation will be that the researchers will have regular dialogue with the science panel. We open the feedback and direction from the science panel so that we're getting exactly what they need to answer the questions they have. Just a quick example, this is the simple conceptual model. There's 4 or 5 different versions. We've developed one that's more for public consumption, just generally explains how all the linkages are connected. There's maybe 5 or 6 boxes on the whole thing. This is what we call a, the name is escaping me, a causal model, where up top we have our sources coming into the lake of water and nutrients. On the bottom we have how the lake is used, so our beneficial uses of aquatic life, recreation, agriculture, and everything in the middle is how nutrients and water are processed through the system, the factors that are modifying those relationships like lake level, wind, turbidity, those kinds of things. So just as an example. And then we have
This is the simple one you said?
and then we have the ecosystem conceptual model where it gets bigger every time we get comments back.
Can you bring the complex one next meeting?
Yeah. This is being developed just for the scientists around the table, and they all understand this way better than I do. The next is an ecosystem model, is more bringing in how some of those more biological interactions and macrophytes, vegetation, how all of those are connected. Those are all generally expressed here, but it's just reordering and so that you can dive into more those components individually in more detail. So anyway, that's all I have.
Okay. Any questions on water quality study? Great.
You're up next, Mike.
All right, I have a couple slides. Got the range over here, great, it's not like...
Thanks, Juan.
Easy.
All right, the June Sucker Recovery Implementation Program, we recently had our annual assessment meeting back in early April. And to sum things up, the best way to probably state all this is that we're really on a roller coaster ride. It seems like for every piece of good news we have, there's an accompanying piece of sobering news or bad news that we have to deal with. But on the good news front, and not to get too techy or too far off into the weeds on the science, but this was a presentation on our June sucker population modeling. And do break it down by 3 tributaries where we're able to monitor spawning fish, and then do a population-wide, kind of a lake-wide, all June sucker population model also. The numbers to look at is this lambda value. This is population growth rate. If that is over 1, that means your population is growing. If it's under 1, your population is declining. And for years, despite our stocking efforts and despite what we thought we were seeing in the river, our lambda values have consistently been below 1. And this is the first time that we have started to see positive growth rates in our population. And my impression is that our population has been growing for quite some time. We just finally got enough data to be able to represent that in these models. And so having numbers even just a little bit over 1 is a big step for us as we move forward. And with this news and some other progress that we've made, the Fish and Wildlife Service has submitted all of the paperwork. It's basically a downlisting package that would reclassify June sucker as no longer being an endangered species. They would be downgraded to, or upgraded, depending on your viewpoint, to threatened species, meaning that enough has been accomplished that the species is no longer at risk for extinction. It would be a pretty big accomplishment if we can get all of this done. And it looks good. We probably will know by the end of the year whether it's a go or not. On carp removal, these are going all the way back to when we started removing carp in September of 2009. We just have pounds on the y-axis and then year across the x-axis. You can see our removal peaked in about 2014 at about 4 million pounds of carp that came out of the lake and has gone down really ever since then.
Is that a factor of funding or?
It's a factor of being able to catch fish.
Okay, that's good.
So in 2017, our carp modeling or monitoring out there showed that the population hit a low point of about 10 carp per acre out on the lake. That population rebounded a little bit up in the neighborhood of 17, which showed some response from the carp population, probably to be expected. This year we are not off to the best start. The weather has been crazy. We were not able to ice fish again. So through April we have removed just shy of 300,000 pounds of carp. And I would like to say that's because of lack of carp. I think it's actually been, we've had fewer fishing days this year than any other January through April period of us doing this. Last year at this time we were at 764,000 pounds. So we are less than half of what we were at this time last year. So that is somewhat sobering. Also, our modeling, and no model is perfect. We've hired Utah State University to put together a population model to show the ability of the population to respond to our carp removal efforts. And it's easy to say when you don't like what a model says, to just disregard it and say, well, that's junk. We don't like what this model says. It basically says that no matter what we do by removing fish this way, we can't hold the population in check. And there are all kinds of different caveats that go with that. That model would also predict if we went back to 2009, there wasn't a removal effort that would have accomplished what we accomplished. So that said, it has caused us to go back to trying to build our toolbox a little more. We will continue to remove adults, but we really need to find some alternative methods. Not that we think there's a silver bullet out there that will accomplish everything, but we are going to need a variety of methods moving forward if we want to keep the carp population in check. So.
Can I ask a question, Mike? You mentioned, I think you said 2018 was 17 carp per acre. Do you know what the estimates were before fishing started?
I don't off the top of my head.
I mean, obviously significantly more,
Yeah.
but...
I could get you that report.
Okay.
that has all of it. I probably should put those graphs in here.
No problem.
Graphs and slides this morning.
I thought it was at least 60 or something like that. 60, and then the pounds per was double that or something.
Probably.
Okay.
And then our other introduced invasive species on the lake, northern pike. We first saw these 2010, 2011. We believe they were the product of an illegal introduction. It's really the only way that pike could have made it to Utah Lake. And somebody probably moved multiple pike multiple times. We believe they came from Yuba Reservoir. How they got here at this point probably doesn't matter because we have them, they're reproducing, and we've been doing this effort to try to remove as many as we can opportunistically. I wouldn't say we're running a pike removal program by any means. We had a huge effort in 2015 as part of a research project where we tried to collect as many as we can. That's why that number is so high. But right around 20 to 40 seems to be the number that we pick up. And pike, they're an apex predator. They can eat very large fish. And they have the potential to really change the fish community on Utah Lake if they ever take off and kind of reach a carrying capacity. Our monitoring would show that the population hasn't exploded yet, but there certainly is that potential for it to happen. This is an adult pike. It's just shy of about 2 feet long. And this is a video. What Utah State has been doing for us is they have been doing gut contents, aging of pike, trying to develop a pike population model. So that fish in that jar, which is probably about 10 inches long, came out of the stomach of that 2-foot long pike, and that is a June sucker. It's likely one of the June sucker that we had recently stocked into the lake. And so the potential for pike to play a negative role in our June sucker recovery is certainly out there. And our researcher throws this up as kind of this extreme dramatic, they're eating your stockfish. I don't want that message
In violation of federal law.
Exactly. But he put this together to kind of grab our attention. In reality, this pike probably wouldn't eat again for maybe a month because that would fill it up pretty well. We are continuing to work on pike, and similar to June sucker, or similar to carp, we really need to develop some more methods. The thing with the pike population is we struggle to find a place to reliably catch them. With carp, we know where to go to consistently fish. The only place we can consistently catch northern pike is at the mouth of Hollow Creek, and it's in the month of February and March. Other than that, we don't know where they go. Nobody processes more fish out of Utah Lake than Loy Fisheries, and they catch on the order of about 30 a year. So one idea on the table is to tag pike and follow them and see where they go throughout the year, give us an idea of where to focus. We're trying to balance that with the alternative of if we have a pike in our hands, is it better to take it out of the system rather than keep the population going? We're going in that direction of kind of this fish idea where we can use them against each other. So this was some more sobering news. Can get past the video here. And then on the Provo River Delta project, about 2 weeks ago, we signed a purchase agreement with the Despain family that would allow us to acquire the remainder of the land needed in order to construct the Provo River Delta. We've been kind of in a stalemate for a number of years, but things finally broke our way a couple of weeks ago, as I said. That still has to go through legal review. No money or land has exchanged hands yet, but this is what we're looking at as far as our project area. This is Utah Lake State Park down here off of the corner. This is Lakeshore Drive up through here. And this will be our final project boundary when we're able to move forward. It is smaller than what we had originally planned, and even smaller than the compromise that we put into the environmental impact statement. Now, given that we have a set project area, we're working on finalizing the designs, getting our last remaining permits, and then we're pushing as hard as we can to have construction start in the spring of 2020. So just shy of a year from now. It will likely be about a 4-year construction project in order to complete this. And as part of this process, we acquired some land outside of the project area that was used in this purchase agreement, kind of a land swap. We ended up retaining, it's about, I'm going to blow this, I want to say about 14 acres right in here, probably more than that, between Bow Harbor Drive and the Provo River that remains under ownership of the USA. Long term, we don't know who we would transfer that to, but the idea is that this could be used for recreational benefits, and what we would find a state or local entity that could take over ownership of that property.
Can you remind me what the details of the project are?
What the
4-year project?
Provo River Delta restoration.
Provo River Delta, so right now we have thousands of June sucker that spawn in the Provo River, and they produce millions and millions of larval fish. But very few of those fish even make it back to Utah Lake because of the nature of the lower channel, the way it's been channelized and dredged. The deepest part in the lower channel is 21 feet deep. It's deeper than Utah Lake. And so it becomes this bathtub where we just dump larval fish into, and usually we don't even have enough water to push the larval fish out to the lake. When we did a project similar on Hobble Creek, we found that this delta type habitat with these wetland ponds provide great habitat for little June suckers to survive and grow. And so replicating that here on the Provo River will give us a ton of habitat for those millions of larval fish. And we think this is the key to getting this population to survive on its own, where we don't have to continually stock fish forever. And my first week on the job, which was over 11 years ago, we had a meeting about what are we going to do, and this was the idea that we came up with. And so it has taken us forever to even get to this point. But to be able to say we're about to start construction, in a year we'll start construction, it's nice to see it coming to fruition. It's been a long time coming.
Chris Kelleher reported similar things after 15 years to get the Hobble Creek project done. So
You beat him.
yeah, you're
So
faster,
far, right.
faster than Chris.
And this was historically kind of the delta for the river, right?
Yeah, well, historically, the delta probably ranged from a little bit north of here all the way down past the airport. Yeah. Not
So it was Skipper
active
Bay.
all the time, but the river would have moved back and forth across that huge swath of land. The lake would inundate this area almost every year if it wasn't for Skipper Bay Dike. It was built here. This was built in the late 1930s and keeps the lake from going over here. Even in the spring, the families have to pump to keep this dry enough to be able to farm. This was the location of Covana Beach Resort back in the 20s.
Where's this building in comparison to this?
It's off, I guess, it's kind of
Yep,
right
right
on the
there.
edge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is the parking lot, this is the ice rink, we're like right there. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Can I get one? I forgot this point here. So just to finish up, I missed the point 7. Utah Lake Festival. All the planning is complete for that. It's June 1st from 10 to 2. We'd love it if all of you could come down to that. It's a really fun event. There's learning activities, there's prizes, there's fun activities, paddleboarding. It's an enjoyable event that also gives people an opportunity to learn about Utah Lake and the June Sucker program and what it means for the lake. And as you can tell from that report, it means a lot to the lake. A ton has been accomplished just in an effort to restore June Sucker. It has benefited many other elements of the lake and its surroundings. Also, paddle camps this summer. We continue to kind of help out with the paddle camps that take place down here at the state park. This year we're doing a t-shirt as our sponsorship. So all the kids that come to the camp, we expect somewhere in the ballpark of just over 100, get a t-shirt that we had Kaylee design for us. That's pretty cool. But that's another fun activity or a good activity for perception on the lake, because it usually means the whole family comes down to drop the kids off, and oftentimes Joe will keep one or two of the parents around to help volunteer, and they walk away from the event with a totally different perspective of the lake, much more positive. So that's all I had for that.
Okay, it's time for just updates from the committee members and general comments from the public. We typically just go around the room and give everyone opportunity to ask questions or make comments on things that they would seeking advice on. So we'll start over here in the corner. Anything?
Yeah, we've been working with the Tim Nebo Conservation District on a 4,000 West drain project within RCS. I was hoping to talk to you guys about it. I've been working with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands on some June Sucker stuff down there where that hits the water. Working with the Mitigation Commission, Jerry Lee Shepherd down there. So I wanted to talk to you guys about the water users. But yeah, working on that project, trying to restore that along those two parcels down to 5200 South. If you guys are familiar with the property. Basically, it flows year round, has cattle, but it's coming for miles and carries ag grain. And so it's, as the Utah Lake City goes, it seems important. And I did propose a non-point source grant to fund this. So we'll know on Friday if that gets funded, but we'll keep you included. Hopefully talk to you guys after.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, Central Utah Water has a symposium next Tuesday. The topic is safeguarding water. Some of you guys are probably already planning on coming, but anyone that's not or didn't know about it is welcome to sign up and attend. It's a free event, and it's going to be covering topics from everything from cybersecurity to wildfires to infrastructure, sustainability. So, and it's here in Provo. You can go to the Central Utah Water website. I think there's a link on there to it if you want to register.
At the top.
Yep.
That's where I registered.
Sullivan.
I don't have a lot, but I would like to thank everybody who participated in our first day event. Utah Lake Commission was a great sponsor and provided a lot of bags and sunglasses and various items, gloves and whatnot. We had a lot of people there. We had I guess all of the population of Singapore residents in the county or the area. A lot of returned missionaries, I guess. They came out in large numbers there. Because we had some prior cleanup along the lakeshore, there wasn't as much lakeshore trash available to be picked up, but they did do that. And we planted 8 trees, and then we did a lot of trail cleanup and some wetlands cleanup and everything. But I just want to thank the Lake Commission for their involvement with that.
Okay, thanks, Sullivan. Clayton, do you have anything? D? Good.
No.
Scott? No. Good.
I think one
Jesse?
of the water users were using about 110 CFS, but no pumping's going on right now.
That's a good thing.
A lot of water.
Good. Mike, anything else?
Next meeting, I just want to make sure.
So at the bottom, July 17th.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
We'd just like to keep working with Eric. I don't know what we found out with UDOT and on the maintenance of Spring Creek. We talked a little bit about it, but I don't know if the technical committee regular maintenance of the lake to include those channels?
It's a good question for the group. When I brought it before a couple contacts, and the response that I heard was, it's the effluent of Springville City. Likely it's largely a responsibility of Springville City to maintain it, but maybe there's others in the group that could pitch other ideas for that. Is it?
Well, we gather the water from Spring Creek, which is waters in the U.S., and that's one of the DNR who has jurisdiction over those waters too.
Waters of the U.S.?
We
Morgan, do you know?
contribute about 3 million gallons a day, but the spring also comes through the fish hatchery. So all that water that eventually goes through the fish hatchery that generates into that Spring Creek
Yep.
well or spring goes through that channel.
What's the problem?
It
It's
backs
just
up.
choked up and it's starting to back up the water where you cannot see any daylight underneath the culvert that goes underneath I-15. Starting to flood some of the property just east of the freeway.
Because it's choked up?
Yeah. And the water, there is a pond right by the golf course, the Provo golf course. And there is a dike divided into water bodies. The body
Right.
to the south is still about 3 feet higher than the one to the north, where the water has to spill over. Right now, we were working with the county. Springville City's funding most of the project, where PG and
PNG.
is going to use some of their mush masters with some kind of a tailing device to try to establish a channel and try to get that water. But I'm looking for a permanent maintenance program where I don't know how often we keep the vegetation down, or dredge or whatever.
I know that
It's not, I don't have jurisdiction over the land.
Yep.
We produce the water, but then it's just becomes telling the total bay.
Reed, you worked on Taylor Drain. Maybe explain how that's worked over the years. That's kind of a similar type problem.
Yeah. We've ignored it.
It's been ignored since the day the channel was created, and now it's on my watch, and everybody's pointing at me to.
Yeah, we're starting to plan to take care of ours is a stormwater issue down in Orem, and we've got. In fact, we have a meeting on tomorrow to talk specifically about that. But that's 100% our water, so that's you're suggesting that you've got a mixture of your water and other people's water, so it should be a shared responsibility.
And then UDOT also contributes a little of the stormwater to that same.
Yeah, I would. UDOT's, when we've had stormwater issues, UDOT's been pretty good to admit
UDOT
that
did
it's
not turn you down.
What's that?
UDOT was not one of those that said, it's probably Springville. So I'm still waiting to hear back from UDOT.
Where we don't own the property, or it's who owns that land out there?
Mostly forestry, fire, and state lands.
When it cuts across a
Anything west
private
of the
parcel.
freeway
It's
anyway.
their job to keep it open.
I was not a part of that discussion, but I know it's been discussed in our office, so I can send you an update.
Who would be a good person to establish a?
Probably Laura All would be your
What's
best
her-
bet.
who's
Laura
that?
All. Laura
Or
All.
Morgan.
Or me.
Laura's who I spoke with.
Yeah, and I'm sure she probably said that we're not interested in dealing with that, but I can look into it more.
Yeah, when it comes to our issues with Taylor Drain, we worked with Ben before you, Morgan,
Right.
and Forestry, Fire, and State Lands is more than willing to let you have access to get that stuff cleaned out as long as you have Army Corps clearance and you're not impacting any wetlands, or if you do, that you're mitigating for that. But yeah, our somewhat similar issue in Orem is we have to take care of it ourselves, but we're the only source. But if there were others that contributed to flows, we'd be doing exactly what you were doing and try to share responsibility. So I think it sounds to me like you're moving down the right path, just a matter of twisting arms. So, yeah.
Sorry to not have better news.
Anything else? Okay, our next meeting is scheduled for July 17th. And it will be held here. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. We'll be adjourned then. Thank you for your attendance.